Hello, I am Peter Okwache. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. A historic rerun. Malawians prepare for Tuesday's presidential election after last year's was annulled. We'll look at what's at stake. More cases of coronavirus in one day than ever before. There are now close to 9 million cases worldwide. Also on the program, it's 72 years since the Empire Windrush arrived in Britain. The ship brought Caribbean migrants to settle in the UK, but decades later, many were threatened with deportation. We'll hear their stories.
The lesson to be learned is to treat people fairly, especially the people that you have depended upon and the people that have enriched this country.
And the visual artist who works with women in Nigeria's rural communities aiming to change perceptions. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. All systems go. That's according to Malawi's Electoral Commission, which says all polling centres are ready for tomorrow's rerun of the presidential election. 5 months ago, a landmark decision by the Constitutional Court annulled the results of the vote held in May last year. The incumbent, President Peter Mutharika, was declared the winner, but opposition leaders challenged the results, citing massive irregularities. The court agreed, cancelled the result, and ordered a repeat. The BBC's Emmanuel Ligunza reports on what's at stake and why it matters for Malawians.
It's been more than a year since Malawians went to the polls to elect a new president. But the results of that election last May were annulled, plunging the country into a deep, unprecedented political crisis. Violent anti-government protests erupted across the country, with millions calling for freer electoral process. On Tuesday, they will get a second chance to elect their leader.
I think it is very important for me to vote on Tuesday because I believe government administration always influences the future of its citizens.
I hope voting will change things because, for example, I have children, 2 boys that I struggled to send to school. I have to get into the business of selling chickens to raise their school fees. My hope is that they will in turn help me, but up to now, they have no jobs. Some political parties have been promising jobs for the youth. It's good that we go vote so that our children can find something to do for a living.
The vote will pit incumbent Peter Mutharika, who is seeking a second and final 5-year term in office, and veteran politician Lazarus Chakwera, a former evangelist who has united the opposition under a coalition looking to unseat the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, which was formed in 2004 by the current president's brother. In many ways, this election will also be held under different rules after the Constitutional Court ruled that the first-past-the-post system was unconstitutional.
After the nullification of the 2019 election, we are in a quandary. We do not have a legitimate government, a government that has been legitimized through the ballot. So this affords opportunity to those that are contesting to be legitimized, to have a government which is properly legitimized, it is able to represent the population of Malawi.
Whoever wins the race will have to heal the deep divisions in Malawi and end the vicious cycle of violence witnessed over the past year. Tackling corruption, poverty reduction and unemployment are also other key electoral issues. Malawians hope their voice will be heard and that Tuesday will in some ways mark the turning point for the country. Emmanuel Ligunza, BBC News.
Let's take a quick look at other stories making the headlines across Africa now. And prosecutors at the International Criminal Court say judges made fundamental errors when they cleared former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo of crimes against humanity. At an appeal hearing in The Hague, they also called for the decision to be overturned and demanded a retrial. Mr. Gbagbo was acquitted in January last year on charges related to post-electoral violence in Ivory Coast from 2010 to 2011. He's currently living in Belgium on conditional release. Tens of thousands of South African commuters have been stranded during a strike by minibus drivers. Taxis blocked major roads in the cities of Johannesburg and Pretoria, causing long delays. The drivers are demanding more financial support from the government, saying coronavirus restrictions have reduced their income. Taxis can only operate at 70% capacity to ensure social distancing. The former president of South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, has withdrawn from an event organized by the American Bar Association about law and racism. His foundation said the former apartheid leader did not want to embarrass himself or his host, given the current charged racial climate. Several South African rights groups, including the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioners, had criticized the invitation. Now, in just one day, 183,000 people around the world were confirmed to have coronavirus. That's the highest daily total so far, according to the World Health Organization, and takes the total number of people who have had the disease to nearly 9 million. That's 9 million cases of an illness only diagnosed for the first time at the end of last year. Most of the new cases are in the Americas, with Brazil recording more than 54,000 new infections on Sunday. It now has more than 1 million confirmed cases, although with a low testing rate, there could be many more. The US recorded more than 36,600 new cases, also on Sunday, bringing its total to more than 2.2 million. Here's the BBC's James Robbins.
Each new grave is a tragedy of the pandemic. Brazil has now registered more than 50,000 deaths and more than 1 million infections. President Bolsonaro's determination to dismiss the threat, oppose lockdowns and reject distancing has been hugely divisive. Many still support his far-right views, but others say he is to blame.
We didn't prepare, we didn't take this seriously, and now we see exponential curves exploding. When politicians face biology or challenge biology, biology wins by a huge margin.
Peru and Chile have been particularly hard hit too. Poorer countries often have limited health care. In Peru, they're struggling. But many governments feel they have to take risks to get their economies working again.
So the trend is decreasing, and that allows us to gradually and progressively begin to restart some of the economy.
But it's the world's most powerful country which has recorded the highest number of coronavirus deaths. Across the vast territory of the USA, some states are relaxing measures in response to a decline in new cases, just as others face fresh spikes. The whole nation is hurting in this crucial election year. In India, by far the world's largest democracy, the growth in cases is relentless. Huge cities suffered first, but coronavirus is now spreading through villages, which are home to the majority of India's 1.3 billion population. Rural areas are under-equipped, and across the country, serious under-reporting by the authorities of COVID deaths is believed to be concealing the full scale of India's disaster. But even in wealthy countries widely praised for their early responses, real risks remain. Germany is seeing new localized outbreaks at a block of flats in Berlin and at a big meat processing factory in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. Locally, the general easing of lockdowns is being reversed to prevent progress so far being lost. James Robbins, BBC News.
Now, today marks 72 years since the Empire Windrush arrived in the UK, a ship that brought immigrants from Jamaica to help rebuild Britain after the Second World War. In the years that followed, around 500,000 people from the Caribbean settled in the UK. But decades later, some were wrongly informed they were in the country illegally. They were often detained and even deported. It became known as the Windrush scandal. The BBC's Graham Satchell has been speaking to two people who were affected.
I don't consider this home as such anymore. I have kids, I've got my children. I was more than worried, I was frightened.
No disrespect, I'm just as much British as you are, or my friend over there, or anybody in even the Queen or Boris Johnson, or anybody. I'm equally as British. I may not be the same colour, but that's totally irrelevant. Totally irrelevant.
Judy and Vernon, just two of the thousands of British people whose lives were turned upside down in the Windrush scandal.
Arrivals at Tilbury. The Empire Windrush brings to Britain 500 Jamaicans.
72 years ago today, the Windrush saw the start of migration from the Caribbean. Those on board had come to work, to rebuild Britain after the Second World War.
Why have you come to England? To seek a job. And what sort of job do you want? Any type, so long as I get a good pay.
In 1948, Britain passed a Nationality Act. Everyone who lived in the former empire, the Commonwealth, was confirmed as a British citizen. That stayed in place until 1971. The people who arrived from the Caribbean in that time are known as the Windrush generation. Judy was just 8 when she left Barbados in 1963. Even as a small girl, she remembers the call from Britain for help.
Really, you should come, and the mother country needs you, and everybody being issued with British passports, because, you know, even before we had the passport, we were always, to us, together, we saw ourselves as British.
Vernon was 6 when he arrived in London from Jamaica.
My mum had a Commonwealth passport, and I came over on her passport, which automatically made me a British subject.
Both Vernon and Judy went to school here, grew up here, got jobs, had families. Then, in 2014, everything changed. The Conservative government introduced a so-called hostile environment for illegal migrants. Nationality checks had to be done before people could get housing, a job, NHS treatment. Both Vernon and Judy had never confirmed their British status. They never had to. But all of a sudden, they were caught in the system.
I am still very angry. I want that to be known. I'm enraged. And I'm still enraged. Why didn't you ask me that when I was working in healthcare, cleaning old people and all the rest of it? Why didn't you ask me that when I was patrolling the streets and having people spit at me for ticket on their car and all this? You didn't ask me about that then. That was the time you should have asked me.
I had no idea that somebody got down and actually planned to get rid of as many immigrant people as possible. You know, so... And I just got caught up in it. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry I happened, because I love the United Kingdom.
When it became clear that elderly black British people were being detained and deported, the government eventually apologised and introduced a compensation scheme. Today, the Home Secretary is announcing a new cross-party working group to, in its words, right the wrongs of the Windrush scandal. Vernon is yet to have his British citizenship officially confirmed. Judy lost her job and is still waiting for compensation. Both have the same message for the government.
Do unto others as you would like done unto yourself. If everybody was to live to those simple words, what a wonderful place we would live in, wouldn't we?
The lesson to be learned is to treat people fairly, especially the people that you have depended upon and the people that have enriched this country with their labour, their sweat, their tears, everything else. It's as simple as that. That is the lesson, and there's nothing hard about that. Treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. That is the lesson.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okocha. Still to come on the programme, it battled the Ebola epidemic, but how is Sierra Leone responding to the coronavirus pandemic? We hear from one community. Peter Okocha, welcome back. When the Ebola epidemic struck in 2014, Sierra Leone was one of the hardest hit countries, and now it's having to contend with the coronavirus. The first case was confirmed in March, and there have been 55 deaths reported so far. Tyson Conte is a filmmaker in the city of Makeni. He documented the Ebola outbreak for the BBC, and once again, he's witnessing fear and uncertainty in the streets. He's been charting the early days of the outbreak and how Sierra Leone is fighting the threat.
Sierra Leoneans, until we all know say coronavirus don't reach our country, let we stand firm and make sure say it not spread now this nation. My name is Tyson Conte. I'm a filmmaker for Makeni, Sierra Leone. Hey, Bo, what's happening? I have been in fear for some days now. I am alarmed about what is happening in my town. So, I've decided to keep a video diary. Today, a body appeared on the street corner at the junction where I grew up.
I just come in past now, they tell me say this and I don't live so you don't die. I mean the small brother for the late woman we die. In the area like, for the sick, they don't sick for the past 1 month. Yes, and the sick, as I say, don't the monitor, so they go for Butika in Mamba. The man go for Butika yesterday.
She was a woman, a member of our community called Yalmami, who some time ago ran away to Freetown. The sickness affected her in Freetown. On her way back, she got worse. The driver noticed and was scared. He stopped right at the junction, dragged her out of the car and ran off. Yalmami fell down and died. Because people thought her case could be related to coronavirus, nobody helped her. This is serious. This affects our society because this is not who we normally are. Before, everybody would be jumping to her rescue. People would be crying and supporting her. But today, no one could do what we believe in, what we stand for, and what makes us who we are. I can still remember the Ebola outbreak. I lost many of my friends. We were praying for the coronavirus not to reach us because we know what it can be. But now it's here.
We don't see what this sickness can do. Not the nation, not the world, not the universe. They are begging brothers and sisters them. Not a lot of me business. Not me business, not you business, not all my business.
An atmosphere of wahala, a Creole word which can mean fear, chaos, trouble, crisis has gripped Sierra.
That report there by the Sierra Leonean filmmaker Tyson Conte. Now, students in the UK should have been taking exams this month, many to try to gain a place at university. But the coronavirus pandemic has meant they have been called off. Racial equality groups are concerned that the alternative assessments may be biased against black and other minority as well as lower socio-economic background students, potentially hampering long-term social mobility. The BBC's Rodri Davis reports.
Student Jay Ferguson is aiming this summer to do what his parents did not and secure a place at university. But the coronavirus pandemic has heightened concerns that might not happen. He's been sitting down to do coding, internships and networking online since schools were closed and exams cancelled. He scored AAB grades in mock A-level exams, but he's unable to see where a replacement system of teachers' predicted grades will leave his ambitions.
Yeah, everyone is feeling nervous, just like me, I guess. Some people feel okay because some people have really good predicted grades, but then those who have lower predicted grades but put in the effort to do better for the exams, they've had that opportunity taken from them.
And the exact forces at play in teachers' grading is unclear, with concerns over potential unconscious bias, particularly against black, other minority and poorer students.
The bias that some teachers may have, maybe an unconscious bias even, it just needs to be people just need to be made aware and sort of analyse themselves and try and look up upon the student as a whole, holistically.
Yet the UK government says it will grade students holistically based on teacher assessment, mock exam results and assignments. Shut schools and exams being called off have affected hundreds of thousands of pupils' plans in the short term, but there are concerns that any possible ramifications could have impacts in the long term. Initially, that's in trying to get into one of these, a university. Whilst the research is indefinitive, some says that only 16% of predicted grades are accurate, and while 75% of applicants are over-predicted, black students are most likely to be under-predicted. So a coalition of race equality organisations wrote to the Department of Education. They called for compliance with the Equality Act by assessing for and identifying any institutional racism and bias and taking steps to mitigate any impact. But the government has not adopted those recommendations.
There is a lack of data, there is a lack of proper data, there is a lack of proper research on this issue. And the lack of data and the lack of research doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist. And what the Public Sector Equality Duty would have done is enable the schools to use the data that they have to identify any systemic bias.
In response, England's exams regulator said to the BBC in a statement, "The arrangements we have put in place this summer are fairest in the circumstances, and it says students unhappy with their grades can sit exams towards the end of this year." That would mean more time lost, more problems gained, and more concerns for social mobility. Rodri Davis, BBC News.
Now, this image over my left shoulder is part of a series of photographs of women in rural communities in Nigeria. It's the work of visual artist Etinosa Yvonne, who aims to change the way women are represented in the country. Her recent collaboration with international charity Action Aid in Abuja captures how women have been affected by the coronavirus. Let's hear from her.
You know, whatever image I'm taking, I'm also asking myself, will I like to be seen in that way? You know, if I would not like to be seen like that, would I like to show my mother like that? Why would I show someone else like that? You know, to be able to try to capture the struggles of women in Nigeria and also celebrate their strength, because I would say that it takes a lot of strength to be a Nigerian woman. So I also try not to continue to churn out repetitive and stereotypical images of of women in the country. I've been to communities where they have not had pictures taken of them in years. And most of them grew up knowing that it is men who photograph people. And then they see a woman and, you know, they are excited. Also, a lady can hold the camera. I don't just go into a space and start shooting. I go into a space and I greet at Kotsai. I have to greet all the women. There's nothing like a first person perspective, you know. The person comes from that community. Unlike when it's from an outsider, you know, you can always tell the difference. So I sometimes take the young girls and I tell them, look at what I'm doing. This was not what I was doing some years ago. And I always make sure that I try to encourage the women.
Brilliant stuff. That's it on Focus on Africa. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.